Reject her now, and the moon itself will remember your choice." The old priest's trembling warning disappeared beneath the thunder of applause as Alpha King Damien Ashford stepped onto the sacred stone platform beneath the brightest full moon the kingdom had seen in generations. Thousands of wolves filled the moon-blessing arena, their silver cloaks shimmering beneath ancient lanterns while banners bearing the royal crest danced in the cool night breeze. Every pack had gathered to witness the ceremony that would unite the Alpha King with his fated Luna. It was supposed to become the happiest night in the kingdom's history. Instead, it became the beginning of a tragedy no one would understand for years. Claire Bennett stood alone at the center of the ceremonial circle, wearing a simple ivory gown embroidered with delicate silver thread. She was only 26 years old, her quiet grace standing in sharp contrast to the restless whispers surrounding her. Unlike the daughters of powerful families, Claire carried no reputation for extraordinary strength. She had never shifted into her wolf. She had never displayed unusual abilities. Many believed she was nothing more than a weak Omega, blessed with an unfortunate destiny. Even so, the sacred moonstone had chosen her as the Alpha King's fated mate. Some accepted the will of destiny. Others believed fate had made an unforgivable mistake. Damien looked into Claire's hopeful eyes, but uncertainty weighed heavier than instinct. His advisors had spent weeks filling his mind with warnings. They insisted the kingdom needed a powerful Luna capable of leading every pack. They questioned Claire's bloodline. They questioned her missing wolf. They questioned whether destiny alone should decide the future of an entire kingdom. Slowly, Damien lifted his head before the gathered wolves. His voice echoed across the silent arena. "I reject this mating bond." A wave of stunned silence swept through the crowd before scattered laughter broke the stillness. Some nobles smiled with satisfaction. Others exchanged relieved glances. Claire did not cry. She did not plead for another chance. Her shoulders trembled for only a brief moment before she straightened her posture with quiet dignity. She lowered her gaze, bowed respectfully to the throne, and stepped backward out of the sacred circle without speaking a single word. Her silence carried more pain than any argument ever could. As she turned away, a faint silver mark hidden beneath the sleeve of her left wrist flickered for the briefest instant, unnoticed by everyone except the elderly priest. His weathered face turned pale. He tightened his grip around the ancient staff and whispered words no one nearby could hear. "The seal has begun to break." Far above the arena, clouds drifted across the full moon. The brilliant silver light dimmed for only a heartbeat before returning once more, yet several old wolves exchanged uneasy looks as if the night itself had quietly changed. Damien watched Claire disappear through the towering palace gates, convincing himself he had protected the kingdom from a dangerous mistake. He ignored the strange heaviness settling inside his chest. Behind the palace walls, Claire continued walking alone until the cheers faded into distant echoes. She reached the old stone bridge beyond the capital and finally allowed herself to breathe. She looked up at the moon one last time, unaware that beneath the fabric covering her wrist, the mysterious silver mark glowed brighter than ever before, pulsing softly with a power that had waited her entire life for this single heartbreaking moment to awaken. Claire Bennett never returned to the capital after that heartbreaking night beneath the full moon. She followed an old forest road until the stone walls of the kingdom disappeared behind towering pines and rolling hills, eventually settling in a quiet mountain village where nobody recognized the rejected Luna who had once stood beside the Alpha King. The villagers welcomed her without questions because they measured people by kindness rather than reputation. Claire rented a small wooden cottage surrounded by wildflowers and ancient oak trees. During the day, she gathered healing herbs, baked fresh bread for elderly neighbors, and mended clothing for families who could not afford new garments. Every evening, she watched the moon rise above the distant mountains, wondering why fate had chosen her only to leave her completely alone. She never spoke bitterly about Damien Ashford. Even when painful memories returned, she refused to let resentment become part of her heart. Yet something inside her refused to remain silent. On every full moon, the strange silver mark beneath her left wrist glowed a little brighter than before. At first the light lasted only a few seconds. Weeks later it lingered for several minutes. Then the dreams began. Claire found herself standing inside endless fields covered in silver grass beneath a moon larger than any she had ever seen. Far away, a magnificent white wolf watched her without fear or anger. Its brilliant eyes seemed familiar, almost comforting, yet every time Claire tried to step closer, the dream dissolved before she could reach it. She always woke with tears resting quietly on her cheeks and an unfamiliar warmth spreading through the glowing mark on her wrist. Believing she might be losing her mind, Claire sought the guidance of an elderly healer named Eleanor Whitmore, a respected woman whose wisdom had quietly served the mountain village for decades. Eleanor examined the silver mark carefully without speaking. She listened as Claire described the recurring dreams and the mysterious wolf waiting beneath the moonlight. The old healer closed her eyes for a long moment before offering a gentle smile. "You believe you have no wolf," she said softly. "But sleeping is not the same as missing." Claire stared at her in confusion. "The royal physicians examined me for years. They all reached the same conclusion." Eleanor slowly shook her head. "Sometimes powerful gifts remain hidden until the heart experiences enough sorrow to awaken them. Nature keeps many secrets from those who judge too quickly." Those words settled deep within Claire's thoughts, yet she found them difficult to believe. If such hope had been possible, why had no one discovered it before? Life continued peacefully through changing seasons. Claire devoted herself to simple acts of kindness, gradually earning the affection of everyone in the village. Children often followed her through the forest while she taught them the names of wildflowers and medicinal plants. Elderly neighbors called her their quiet blessing. She found purpose in helping others, even while carrying unanswered questions inside her own heart. Then one crisp autumn evening, as another full moon climbed above the mountains, the silver mark spread farther across her wrist than ever before. Instead of fading, it shimmered like flowing moonlight beneath her skin. At the same moment, a distant wolf's haunting call echoed through the forest. Every animal around the cottage suddenly became still. Claire stepped outside and looked toward the dark tree line where the mysterious sound had come from. Somewhere beyond the ancient woods, unseen eyes seemed to be waiting for her, and for the first time since leaving the palace, she felt certain that her story had not ended on the night she was rejected. It had only just begun. Winter slowly surrendered to spring, and with the changing seasons, whispers of an extraordinary celebration began reaching even the smallest mountain villages. Every pack across the kingdom had received an invitation to attend the Grand Moon Festival, an ancient gathering held only once every several years when wolves renewed their sacred vows beneath the full moon. Travelers passing through Claire Bennett's village spoke of crowded marketplaces, decorated palace streets, and nobles preparing for weeks of ceremonies. They also carried stranger rumors. Hunters claimed the moon had appeared dimmer than usual. Farmers quietly admitted their harvests had become less abundant despite favorable weather. Elders from distant packs wondered whether the kingdom's ancient blessing was somehow fading. Claire listened without joining the conversations. She had spent years building a peaceful life far from the palace, and she had no desire to reopen wounds that had finally begun to heal. Yet each passing night, the silver mark beneath her wrist continued spreading like delicate branches of moonlight beneath her skin. The dreams became clearer as well. The magnificent white wolf no longer stood far away across endless silver fields. Each dream brought it one step closer. It never spoke. It simply watched Claire with patient eyes that carried neither judgment nor fear. Every morning she awoke with the same strange feeling that someone was waiting for her to remember something she had never known. One afternoon, Eleanor Whitmore arrived carrying a folded royal invitation sealed with the crest of the Alpha King. Claire looked at the familiar symbol without touching it. "I have no reason to return," she said quietly. Eleanor placed the invitation on the wooden table before speaking. "Perhaps not. But sometimes destiny returns long after pride has finished speaking." Claire remained silent. She remembered the laughter echoing through the royal arena. She remembered the disappointment in Damien Ashford's eyes. Most of all, she remembered walking away believing she had lost the future the moon had chosen for her. Nothing inside her wished to relive that pain. Days passed before she finally unfolded the invitation. Every pack was encouraged to attend the Grand Moon Festival regardless of rank or status. The celebration promised unity beneath the sacred moon, welcoming every wolf to witness the renewal of the kingdom's oldest traditions. Claire stared at the parchment for a long time before quietly folding it again. Something inside her heart resisted returning, yet the mysterious warmth beneath her wrist pulsed gently, as if responding to the royal seal itself. At nearly the same moment, inside Blackwood Palace, Damien Ashford stood alone upon the highest balcony overlooking the capital. Although the kingdom appeared prosperous, an uneasiness had settled over him that no victory or celebration could erase. Since rejecting Claire years earlier, he had fulfilled every royal duty expected of an Alpha King, yet the mating bond had never formed with another Luna. His advisors blamed fate. Others claimed destiny had simply moved on. Damien tried to believe them, but every full moon brought the same unexplainable emptiness that lingered long after the night had ended. As preparations for the festival continued, the elderly priest who had once begged Damien not to reject Claire quietly observed the fading moonlight from the palace courtyard. He whispered an ancient prayer before lifting his eyes toward the distant mountains. "Please come back before it is too late." Hundreds of miles away, Claire suddenly felt the silver mark blaze with gentle light beneath her sleeve. She stepped outside her cottage and looked toward the horizon where the moon was already rising above the forests. For reasons she could not explain, her feet instinctively turned toward the road leading back to the kingdom she had sworn never to see again. The journey back to the capital took Claire Bennett nearly a week, carrying her through familiar valleys that somehow felt smaller than the memories she had left behind. Every mile stirred emotions she had carefully buried, yet with each sunrise the mysterious silver mark beneath her sleeve glowed a little brighter, as though guiding her toward a destination chosen long before she understood its purpose. By the time the towering walls of Blackwood Palace came into view, the kingdom had transformed into a celebration unlike anything she remembered. Colorful banners stretched across every street. Musicians filled the air with joyful melodies. Merchants displayed handcrafted treasures from distant packs, and wolves from every corner of the realm gathered beneath the approaching full moon. Claire quietly pulled the hood of her cloak lower, hoping to pass unnoticed among the thousands of visitors. For a while, she succeeded. She wandered through the crowded marketplace, smiling politely at children laughing beside decorated fountains and families sharing warm meals beneath strings of silver lanterns. The capital had continued living without her, yet the memories hidden inside every stone pathway still lingered. Eventually, she reached the outer courtyard leading toward the sacred moon temple, where the festival's central ceremony would begin after sunset. There, familiar faces recognized her almost instantly. Whispered conversations spread through the gathering crowd like a cool breeze moving across tall grass. Some nobles exchanged surprised glances. Others quietly remembered the young woman who had once stood beside the Alpha King only to be rejected before the entire kingdom. A few offered sympathetic smiles, but many still looked at her with disbelief. Claire ignored every stare and continued walking with calm dignity. High above the courtyard, Damien Ashford stood upon the palace balcony greeting the arriving pack leaders. As his eyes swept across the growing crowd, they suddenly stopped. Far below, he recognized the familiar figure wearing a simple ivory cloak. For a brief moment, the noise of the festival seemed to disappear. Claire looked older now, not in years, but in quiet strength. The uncertainty that once filled her expression had been replaced by peaceful confidence. Before Damien could move, another royal advisor approached with urgent matters demanding his attention, and the moment passed as quickly as it had arrived. As evening settled across the kingdom, thousands gathered inside the ancient moon temple, where enormous marble columns surrounded the sacred moon stone resting upon its crystal pedestal. The elderly priest slowly entered the ceremonial chamber carrying the same weathered staff he had held years before. His eyes immediately found Claire standing quietly near the back among ordinary villagers rather than nobles. He offered the smallest nod, almost as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. The ceremony began with ancient prayers spoken in voices that echoed beneath the temple's vaulted ceiling. One by one, silver flames surrounding the moon stone flickered to life. Then something unexpected happened. The crystal at the center of the chamber released a faint pulse of pale light before suddenly growing dim. Murmurs spread through the crowd. The priest paused in the middle of his prayer, Every elder present exchanged uneasy looks because the sacred moon stone had never faltered during the moon blessing. Another pulse followed, stronger than the first. Claire instinctively placed her hand over her wrist as warmth spread through her entire arm. Beneath her sleeve, the silver mark shimmered with astonishing brightness. She closed her eyes as an unfamiliar voice echoed gently inside her heart, not spoken aloud, but carried like a whisper through moonlight itself. It said only 4 words. "It is time, Claire." At that exact instant, the moonstone answered with another brilliant pulse, and every wolf inside the temple turned toward the quiet woman standing alone near the entrance, unaware that the ancient prophecy had already begun unfolding before their eyes. The chamber fell into complete silence as the sacred moonstone released a brilliant wave of silver light that spread across the polished marble floor like gentle water beneath the full moon. Every lantern inside the ancient temple flickered at once before burning brighter than they had only moments before. Claire Bennett stood perfectly still, her hand resting against the glowing mark beneath her sleeve, while warmth flowed through every part of her body. She was not afraid. For the first time in her life, the strange feeling that something had always been missing no longer filled her heart. Instead, she felt whole. The mysterious voice returned, calm and familiar, as though it had always belonged within her. "Do not fear who you are." Claire slowly opened her eyes. The silver mark had spread beyond her wrist, forming elegant patterns that shimmered softly along her forearm before disappearing beneath the fabric of her sleeve. A gentle breeze circled the temple even though every door remained closed. The gathered wolves instinctively stepped backward, unable to explain the overwhelming sense of peace settling over the chamber. Damien Ashford watched from the royal platform, his heartbeat quickening with every passing second. Nothing about this resembled the awakening of an ordinary wolf. Even the oldest alpha elders stared in stunned silence, their expressions shifting from confusion to quiet disbelief. The elderly priest lowered his head as tears gathered in his eyes. He had spent decades protecting an ancient secret that few still believed. Now the prophecy was unfolding before him exactly as it had been written centuries earlier. The sacred moonstone suddenly lifted several inches above its pedestal without anyone touching it. Silver light poured from its crystal surface, surrounding Claire in a soft, glowing circle. Instead of blinding those nearby, the light felt warm and comforting, carrying an ancient presence that reached every wolf inside the temple. Many later said it reminded them of coming home after years of wandering. Claire closed her eyes once more as a magnificent image appeared within her mind. The endless silver field from her dreams stretched before her again, but this time the great white wolf did not remain at a distance. It walked toward her with calm confidence until only a few feet separated them. Its brilliant white coat reflected moonlight like fresh snow beneath a winter sky, while its silver eyes held extraordinary wisdom. The wolf gently lowered its head before touching Claire's forehead. In that quiet moment, no words were needed. She understood everything. She had never been born without a wolf. Her true nature had been sealed by an ancient protection until the appointed time chosen by the moon itself. As understanding filled her heart, the white wolf became pure silver light that flowed gently into her. Back inside the temple, the glowing circle surrounding Claire expanded across the chamber. Every alpha present instinctively lowered his head without realizing it. It was not fear that guided them. It was respect rooted deeper than instinct, answering a power older than every royal bloodline. Damien felt the same irresistible pull, struggling to remain standing as the ancient energy filled the room. His eyes never left Claire. The quiet woman he had once believed too weak to stand beside a king now radiated a dignity that no crown could ever create. The moonstone slowly settled back onto its pedestal, but the silver light remained around Claire like a living halo. The elderly priest finally broke the silence with a trembling voice that echoed through the temple. "The moon daughter has awakened." Shock rippled through the gathering as forgotten words from ancient history suddenly became undeniable truth. Claire slowly lifted her gaze toward Damien, not with anger or triumph, but with peaceful certainty. In that single glance, Damien understood something that pierced far deeper than regret. Years earlier, He had believed he was protecting his kingdom by rejecting a quiet Omega with no wolf. Instead, he had turned away the very blessing the moon had chosen to protect them all. The silence inside the moon temple lingered long after the silver light faded, as though every soul present feared that speaking too soon might shatter the miracle they had just witnessed. Claire Bennett stood calmly at the center of the chamber, the warmth of the awakened bond still flowing peacefully through her heart. The silver mark upon her arm no longer pulsed with uncertainty. It rested there with quiet confidence, no longer a mystery, but a symbol of a destiny that had finally revealed itself. Around her, the Alpha Elders slowly raised their heads, their expressions transformed by reverence rather than authority. Men and women who had spent their lives studying the oldest traditions exchanged bewildered glances because none of them had expected ancient legends to become reality within their lifetime. Damien Ashford stepped down from the royal platform without waiting for ceremony or permission. Every footstep echoed through the vast temple as he approached Claire, stopping several feet away. For the first time since becoming Alpha King, he found himself unable to find the words that normally came so easily. He searched her face, remembering the quiet Omega he had rejected years before, and realized she had never changed. The kindness in her eyes remained exactly as it had always been. Only now he understood that true strength had been standing before him all along. Before Damien could speak, the elderly priest carefully unrolled an ancient parchment that had remained hidden within the temple archives for generations. The fragile pages carried faded silver symbols surrounding a single passage written in the oldest language of the Moonpax. With a steady voice, the priest translated the forgotten prophecy for everyone gathered inside the chamber. It declared that the Moon Daughter would walk among ordinary wolves unnoticed until a king rejected the gift placed before him. Only through heartbreak would the sacred seal protecting her true wolf be broken, allowing the kingdom's greatest guardian to awaken when darkness quietly approached the realm. A wave of astonishment spread through the crowd. Suddenly, the fading harvests, the dimming moonlight, and the growing uneasiness throughout the kingdom no longer seemed like unrelated events. They were warnings. Damien lowered his eyes as every memory returned with painful clarity. He remembered ignoring the priest's desperate warning beneath the full moon years earlier. He remembered believing wisdom could overcome destiny. More than anything, he remembered the quiet dignity with which Claire had walked away without anger or accusation. Regret settled heavily upon him, not because he had lost a mate, but because he had failed someone who had never stopped deserving his trust. Finally, he spoke. "Claire, I believed I was protecting my people. I see now that I was protecting my own pride instead." His words carried no command, only honesty. Claire met his gaze peacefully. "The past cannot be changed," she answered gently. "But the future is still being written." There was no bitterness in her voice, yet there was no promise of forgiveness either. She had learned during her years away that compassion did not require surrendering her self-worth. At that moment, the sacred moonstone shimmered once again, releasing a soft glow that spread across the chamber before reaching the great stained glass windows overlooking the capital. Outside, thousands of wolves lifted their eyes toward the temple as silver light rose into the evening sky, like a beacon visible across the entire kingdom. The elderly priest quietly smiled, but his expression soon became thoughtful. He looked toward the horizon beyond the palace walls where distant storm clouds gathered despite the clear weather surrounding the capital. "The awakening was never the end of the prophecy," he whispered. "It was only the beginning." Claire instinctively turned toward the distant mountains as an unfamiliar feeling settled deep within her awakened heart. Somewhere beyond the borders of the kingdom, something ancient had also sensed that the Moon Daughter had finally returned, and whatever was approaching would test not only the strength of a king, but the courage of the woman he had once failed to recognize. The morning after the awakening, the kingdom no longer looked at Claire Bennett with pity. Wherever she walked, conversations softened into respectful silence. Wolves who had once doubted her quietly lowered their heads as she passed, while others simply watched with amazement, struggling to reconcile the gentle woman before them with the ancient Moon Daughter described in forgotten prophecy. Claire accepted neither admiration nor apology with pride. She greeted everyone with the same calm smile she had offered years earlier when no one believed she possessed any value at all. Inside Blackwood Palace, however, Damien Ashford found no peace. Sleep refused to visit him. Every corridor reminded him of the decision that had changed countless lives. The throne room, once a place where every order carried certainty, now felt strangely empty. He understood that regret alone could not repair what pride had broken. If redemption existed, it would have to be earned through choices made every single day. That morning, Damien summoned the Royal Council. Instead of discussing military strength or trade agreements, he announced a series of unexpected reforms. Every pack would receive equal protection under the law regardless of rank. Omegas would no longer be excluded from leadership councils simply because of outdated traditions. Young wolves without awakened abilities would receive the same education and opportunities as those born with visible gifts. Several nobles protested immediately, insisting the old customs had maintained order for generations. Damien listened quietly before answering with unusual honesty. Traditions that deny dignity are not worth protecting. His words spread across the kingdom faster than the morning sunlight. Many welcomed the changes. Others questioned whether the Alpha King had become too influenced by recent events. Damien ignored both praise and criticism. For the first time in years, he no longer governed to preserve appearances. He governed according to the lesson he had learned too late. Meanwhile, Claire prepared to leave the capital once the festival ended. She had never returned seeking recognition, and she refused to allow destiny alone to decide the course of her future. Before sunrise, she visited the palace gardens one final time, where blooming white roses surrounded a quiet reflecting pool. As she admired the peaceful scene, Damien approached without guards, royal robes, or ceremonial symbols. He stood several feet away, careful not to intrude upon the silence she seemed to treasure. "I am not here to ask you to forgive me," he said softly. "I know forgiveness cannot be requested like a favor." Claire looked at the gentle ripples crossing the water before meeting his eyes. "Then why did you come?" Damien took a slow breath. "Because I wanted you to know that whether you remain here or return to your village, I will spend the rest of my life becoming the king I should have been from the beginning." Claire studied him carefully. His voice carried none of the certainty that once defined him. Instead, she heard humility, something far more difficult to learn than authority. She nodded gently, but offered no promise. Trust, once broken, could not be restored by beautiful words alone. Before either could continue, the silver mark on Claire's arm suddenly glowed once again. At the same instant, the palace bells began ringing across the capital, not in celebration but in warning. High above the city, hundreds of birds lifted into the sky at once, flying away from the northern mountains as though fleeing something unseen. The air grew strangely still. Even the fountain beside them stopped rippling for a brief moment. Claire instinctively turned toward the distant horizon, where dark clouds gathered in a perfect circle despite the clear blue sky surrounding the kingdom. Deep within her awakened bond, the familiar white wolf stirred once more, calm but alert. Claire understood the feeling immediately. The prophecy had never been about restoring her place beside a king. It had always been preparing her for the moment when the entire kingdom would need the courage she had discovered only after losing everything she once believed defined her. The warning spread across the kingdom before sunset. Messengers arrived from the northern border reporting that an unnatural darkness had settled over the ancient forest, not as a storm or a season, but as a strange silence that caused animals to abandon their nests and sacred wolves to refuse their evening calls. Rivers still flowed, trees still stood, yet every creature seemed to sense that something old had awakened beyond the mountains. Fear quietly reached the capital, replacing the joy that had filled the Grand Moon Festival only hours before. Inside the royal council chamber, pack leaders argued over how to respond. Some demanded that soldiers be sent immediately. Others insisted the palace should remain protected until the danger revealed itself. Their voices grew louder with every passing minute until Claire Bennett stepped forward. She spoke softly, yet every argument came to an end. "If fear guides our decisions, we will already have lost what we are trying to protect." The room became still. Damien Ashford looked toward her, recognizing the calm confidence that had carried her through every trial without bitterness. This time he did not speak over her or decide for her. Instead, he asked a single question. "What do you believe we should do?" Claire turned toward the large map covering the council table. Her silver mark glowed faintly beneath her sleeve as an unfamiliar certainty settled within her heart. The awakened white wolf was not showing her battle or destruction. It was guiding her toward balance. She gently placed her hand over the northern forests marked upon the map. We do not meet darkness with anger. We remind this land that it is not abandoned. Although many did not fully understand her words, the elderly priest nodded immediately. Ancient records spoke of the Moon Daughter restoring harmony wherever fear threatened to divide the packs. Before dawn the following morning, Damien, Claire, the priest, and a small group of trusted elders traveled toward the northern mountains. The journey covered nearly 100 miles through valleys and towering pines where the air gradually became colder and strangely quiet. Even the wind seemed reluctant to move between the trees. As they reached the heart of the ancient forest, they found no enemy waiting for them. Instead, the oldest moon shrine in the kingdom stood neglected beneath fallen branches and weathered stone. For generations, wolves had gathered there to honor the first covenant between the moon and the packs. But over time the shrine had been forgotten as kingdoms grew larger and traditions changed. Claire slowly approached the worn stone altar. The moment her fingertips rested upon its cool surface, the silver mark illuminated the clearing with gentle moonlight. One by one, the ancient symbols carved into the shrine began glowing once more. Warm light spread across the weathered stones before flowing outward through the surrounding forest. Birds cautiously returned to the branches above. The heavy silence lifted. A gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and wildflowers through the clearing. Every wolf present felt the same peaceful warmth settling inside their hearts. Damien watched in quiet amazement. The kingdom had expected its greatest guardian to conquer through overwhelming strength. Yet Claire restored hope through compassion, humility, and remembrance. He finally understood why destiny had chosen her. Power alone could defend a throne, but only kindness could heal an entire kingdom. As the final rays of silver light disappeared into the evening sky, the elderly priest smiled with quiet relief. "The covenant has been renewed," he whispered. Claire looked toward Damien, and for the first time since they had met years ago, there was no distance created by pride or misunderstanding between them. There remained unanswered questions, unhealed memories, and trust that still needed time to grow, but they now stood beside one another not because fate demanded it, but because they had both chosen to protect the same future with the same quiet hope. Several weeks passed after the covenant at the Forgotten Moon Shrine was restored, and the kingdom slowly transformed in ways no royal decree could have accomplished alone. The fading silver glow that had troubled the night sky returned to its quiet brilliance. Farmers gathered healthy harvests once again. Sacred wolves filled the forests with their evening songs, and travelers remarked that even the air seemed lighter as they crossed the borders of Blackwood. Yet the greatest change was not found in the land itself. It lived within the hearts of its people. Wolves who had once judged others by strength, rank, or reputation began to remember the lesson the moon had revealed through Claire Bennett. Children born without awakened abilities were no longer treated as disappointments. Young Omegas stood beside alphas in schools and councils, learning that character carried greater weight than appearance. Damien Ashford honored every promise he had made, not because he hoped to regain Claire's trust, but because becoming a better king had become part of who he wished to be. He visited villages without ceremony, listened before giving orders, and encouraged every pack leader to lead with compassion instead of fear. The kingdom noticed the difference, but no one noticed it more than Claire. She watched quietly from a distance as actions replaced apologies day after day. One evening, nearly a year after the Grand Moon Festival, the full moon rose once again above the capital. This time the royal courtyard was filled not with anxious expectation, but with peaceful celebration. Families from every pack gathered beneath silver lanterns, children laughed through the gardens, and musicians played melodies that echoed gently across the palace grounds. Claire stood beside the reflecting pool where Damien had once promised to change through actions rather than words. He approached with the same quiet humility that had become natural instead of forced. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply watched the moon reflected upon the still water. Finally, Damien broke the silence. "When I first met you, I believed destiny existed to serve a king. I understand now that destiny was trying to teach the king how to serve others. Claire smiled softly. And what have you learned? He looked toward the people celebrating together throughout the gardens before answering. That love cannot be commanded. Trust cannot be demanded. Both are gifts that must be earned every single day. Claire felt the familiar warmth of the awakened white wolf resting peacefully within her heart. There was no urgent voice guiding her now, no prophecy waiting to unfold, and no mysterious path hidden before her. For the first time, the future belonged entirely to her own choice. She reached out and gently took Damien's hand. It was a simple gesture, but one that carried more meaning than any royal ceremony ever could. Around them, the silver light of the full moon grew brighter, and the sacred moonstone resting inside the temple answered with a gentle glow that spread across the kingdom like a quiet blessing. The elderly priest smiled as he watched from a distance, knowing the oldest prophecy had finally reached its true ending. The moon had never brought two souls together simply because they were destined to meet. It had allowed them to grow through loss, humility, courage, and forgiveness until they freely chose one another. As the night sky filled with countless stars, Claire and Damien walked side by side through the palace gardens, not as a king claiming his Luna or a woman surrendering to fate, but as two people who had discovered that true strength is gentle, that dignity can survive even the deepest rejection, and that the brightest future is built not by destiny alone, but by the choices made with wisdom, compassion, and love.